global leaders we are, the federal government has released draft laws to protect people in the country from experiencing cyber abuse. Individuals could be fined up to $111,000. What is the draft legislation?
Well, this is really important legislation, and it's great that we're leading the world with it, just like we led the world with the legislation against the digital platforms and the way they share and transmit other information. But essentially, this legislation, it increases the response time to some of the previous legislation, and also brings in a whole new, what we call a scheme, which is against trolling, if you will, against adults. And it brings in fines, and it brings in times that social media sites, gaming sites, and others have to take down material.
Nigel, will this also include online streaming like we saw with the confronting vision that was associated with the Christchurch attack?
So there already is some legislation surrounding that, but that is now going to get beefed up. And part of that beefing up is the sites that hold it have to take it down. Before it was 48 hours. Now there's been moved to 24 hours under the proposed legislation.
And the legislation is also open for public consultation. What are you expecting to hear?
I think we're going to hear left and right of arc, which is great. I think we're going to hear from one side of the debate a lot of very prominent people that are just trolled mercilessly, that are just always, out there and putting themselves out there and saying things, and just people are piling in. We're going to hear some other people probably through the middle of the debate. And then on the other side of the debate, you're probably going to get some of these platforms, and it's not just social media, there's games, there's other streaming platforms, which are going to say, well, I think this is actually a lot of overreach. I think you're impinging on freedom of speech. I think you're stopping people from saying what they want to say online against a particular issue or a particular person. So I think we're going to get really diverse opinions.
Nigel, as you mentioned before, there are a variety of platforms. Can you tell us what actually defines cyber abuse?
I think it's really difficult to define it because everyone has their own threshold of what is abusive material. And I think that's going to be really important to have a technology neutral definition in this legislation. And it'll be interesting to see how they go about it, because something that may or may not affect me may or may not affect you or anyone else out there. I might be able to cope with some things being said to me. I might be able to cope with an image or a video, or I might not. And so there is in the legislation an increased threshold for adults to prove over children. I think that's really important to put it out there, because adults generally have more of an ability to cope with things. But some people can't, and we've got to acknowledge that in society, just like we've discovered during COVID-19 lockdown. And we need that ability.
Yeah, we certainly have different thresholds, and children, as we know, have suffered immensely with cyberbullying. Can you tell us what laws are being looked at to increase their protection?
Well, the main thing that's going to increase their protection is the removal notice going from 48 hours to 24 hours. And even 24 hours, I would argue, is way too long when you look at the speed of thought over the internet and how quickly things can be shared. Whether that's through an app, whether that's through a game, whether that's through traditional social media, whether it's through some of your more bespoke social media platforms. A lot of damage can happen to someone's psyche in that time. So I'd actually like to see it reduced before that. But really, I'd like to see that these laws weren't really necessary in the first place. And if the platforms themselves were really investing in their curation of content, then they'd be understanding that something needs to be done, and something should have been done well before this.
You mentioned the psychological damage that it can cause for some people. Do you think the $111,000 fine for individuals, and I believe it's just over $500,000 for businesses at this stage, do you think that's enough? Do you think we need to see higher penalties and other penalties?
The first thing I think is we can't legislate our way out of online problems, that there's more to any issue than just creating more laws. Of course, we have to police those laws. And I think the answer to that question will come in probably 2, maybe 3 years' time. And that's when, hopefully, some of the fines are being dished out. And hopefully we see a change in behaviour by people in the online environment. People seem to think that they're anonymous online, and they're going to really quickly understand that they're not. You're more anonymous probably just walking down the street. We leave a lot of digital footprints about ourselves out there, and I'm hoping the investigation officers at the E-Safety Commissioner really dig down into those and find the perpetrators and say to them it's not okay to do this sort of thing and fine them accordingly.
Yeah, it's certainly not okay, as you said. And finally, Nigel, we've heard from some high-profile people really speaking openly about their own experiences. How important is it for such people to have a voice on this subject in order to get these laws passed? And do we need more voices?
I think we definitely need more voices and a variety of voices. And I think we need to get people that do the trolling, that pile in, so as to speak, need to understand that obviously their behaviour is not okay, but the effect it has on them. Because the majority of these people, if they saw that same person walking down the street and they didn't know who they were, they wouldn't be brazen enough to actually insult them in a real world environment. Yet behind a keyboard, they seem emboldened. And that's where the educative effort needs to take place, is where we need new norms right from the very youngest of school children, that when they get up online and they become digital citizens, they do so ethically and responsibly and lawfully.
Well, Nigel, there's a lot of great work being done. I look forward to next year when we hear more about it. Nigel Fair, Director of the University of New South Wales, Canberra Cyber. Take care and have a wonderful Christmas.
You too, Janie. Thank you.